Welcome back to Podcast Recovery, everyone. We're your hosts, David O.
Carly R.
And Eric B.
You didn't know you were supposed to come in there, did you, Carly? You hesitated.
What?
There is a slight, there's a slight delay, David.
There is a slight
if you
delay.
remember,
I do remember.
from your time being
from
on
my
the
time.
couch.
Okay. Well, anyway, today we are joined by our very special guest, Grif. How are you doing today?
I'm excellent, guys. Good to be on here with you.
Yeah, man.
Absolutely.
Pleasure to have you.
TGIF.
Yeah, man. So where are you from, Grif?
You know, I was born in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, grew up mostly in Texas, and in my adult life and sobriety, I've kind of bounced between Texas and Southern California, and I live in Jupiter, Florida now.
Nice. How's the weather?
The weather is absolutely gorgeous. I just left outdoor meeting under a big banyan tree. It's about 74. And,
Oh,
you know, this is the best time of year in South Florida.
Oh, yeah, that's perfect.
It's still cool, kind of cool in the mornings, warm in the afternoon, but the heat hasn't arrived yet. So it's the best time to live in the tropics.
Absolutely. So when were you first introduced to recovery?
Let's see. You know, I was a nightclub DJ in the 80s, working in
Nice.
Southern California when I was still drinking, and you know, had, I think, 3 DUIs out there, and this was before DUIs are the big deal that they are today.
Mhm.
This was kind of pre-Mothers Against Drunk Drivers, so
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't good, but they weren't putting people in jail and taking away your driver's license. And,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it was the fun with problems phase of my drinking, so I kind of did a geographical cure. My mom had a stroke, and they lived near Houston, so I went back to Houston and opened a big nightclub chain called Confetti there in late 1982. And in December of 82, got really drunk and stoned at work, and got called into the office by my employer the next morning, who told me that I had called the general manager, Harry, an MFer, with about 1,000 people in the club at midnight, really drunk. And they suggested this, it wasn't really rehab. There weren't rehabs in 82, but it was a mental institution. So
Mm-hmm.
they didn't call it that, but they kind of said, you know, if you'll go do this treatment thing, then we'll have a job waiting for you when you get back. Now, it may have been a coincidence, but my Coke dealer also told me that same week that he thought I was an alcoholic. So the universe was definitely attempting to tell me something.
Yeah.
And I was really lucky. I knew nothing about AA or 12-step programs. You know, certainly had no idea they were going to ask me to quit or abstain. Didn't know that was what they did there. So I just kind of said yes and rolled up some Hawaiian pot in my gym bag and checked in to the treatment center thinking they were going to teach me how to drink. And, you know, I was
Yep.
very fortunate. The guy that ran the program there was a sober alcoholic of about 20 years and, you know, just basically began the process of cracking my skull open to the fact that I belonged there. So
Yeah.
that's when I first heard about it, was January of 83.
All right. And how long have you been clean?
Since January of 83. Been clean and sober thanks to, you know, AA and a loving God since my first AA meeting. So
Nice.
it's kind of mysterious.
Yeah. All right. Well, with all that out of the way, we're going to turn it over to you to share your story with us. So take it away.
Good. Well, you already got me started. So, yeah, I'm not a huge drunk-a-log guy. I mean, you know, my background emotionally was I was raised pretty much in a Leave It to Beaver family. You know, my parents were really hard-working middle-class kids from Oklahoma and Kansas. My dad worked for Mobil Oil. He had actually been in the Air Force and decided not to stay in the Air Force because he didn't want to move so much. But we moved, I think, 11 or 12 times before I got out of high school. So he was a marketing guy for Mobil Oil. We moved around every couple of years. And I say that just because looking back on it, I mean, there really wasn't any overt alcoholism in my family. I'm definitely not really I think there's other signs of it, but, outwardly, I did not grow up in an environment with people punching their fists through sheetrock walls and,
Mm-hmm.
the really loud abuse. I mean, me and my brother got spanked by my dad because corporal punishment wasn't a big deal back then.
Yeah.
So I probably had some growing up traumas with a little T,
Mm-hmm.
not a big T like I hear in the rooms.
Mm-hmm.
And, but moving around was interesting for me. It's, the chameleon part of my alcoholism and my codependency, I think got really started there, trying to fit in every couple of years at a new school, trying to, sit on the front row and people please. And, I got very good at just basically kind of being a chameleon,
Mm-hmm.
whatever it took. I just tried to fit in. And, we moved to Connecticut and Pennsylvania and New York and always came back to Texas. So we were kind of bouncing back and forth. And I learned to lie. So I didn't really think it was lying then. I just kind of told stories to make people like and accept me.
Yeah.
Right. And it didn't really matter if they were true. I mean, if I told them enough, they kind of felt true. So the whole, part of honesty, with yourself and with others, was something that was foreign to me when I got there. Right. So, and, like I said, I went to University of Texas, drank, I had my first beer at 14. So we'll do the short history. Went to University of Texas. I skipped my senior year in high school because we moved so much. And I was really mad at my parents for taking me out of high school and moving me to a different city. So I went to University of Texas, pretty much perfected my drinking and drugging there. It was a big party school. And, I made good grades except when I was loaded. And actually, my first major was in psychology. And I switched it the last year to radio, television, and film, thinking I was going to be famous. I was working in nightclubs, DJing to work my way through college. But
that must have been a wild time, being a nightclub DJ in the late 70s, early 80s?
Late 70s, early 80s. So,
wow.
I had actually one of our club managers came in from Philadelphia and showed me how to mix records. People back then didn't mix records. But, yeah, I mean, especially Austin. Austin was really weird back then and an amazing music scene. My brother played in bands with Stevie Ray and Jimmy Vaughn, and it was awesome. Like a big blues scene. And the Armadillo was people like Frank Zappa and Bruce Springsteen and Commander Cody. I mean, it really was pretty epic time to be getting loaded. And the only story I really remember that's of note back then is I drank a whole lot. And, look, I grew up in Texas, guys. So if you grow up in Texas, three things. You're going to fish and hunt, you're going to play football, and you're going to drink a lot. So I never really questioned if I had a drinking problem. It was just kind of cultural. But I do remember a concert at Armadillo one night, and I probably, smoked a lot of pot, did some coke, did some mushrooms, and drank a lot of whiskey. And I remember waking up, there was an auto body shop right in Armadillo World headquarters. And I remember waking up with a horn honking, and I had crawled behind the little metal sign that they put up that says "Don't park in front of the gate," and was asleep, with puke on my ostrich skin boots, and this guy waking me up at like 7 a.m. And it might have dawned on me then that, this might kind of going from fun to fun with problems.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
But, finding the DJ career was really a perfect, job for a sober alcohol or a not sober alcoholic, right? It's like, people brought you free drinks and you were kind of the life of the party, kind of felt like you controlled the place. So it escalated really quickly. Like I said, I moved to Los Angeles or Southern California when I graduated in 78 to become famous, and just became a cokehead instead, but got to work a really amazing 80s club scene in Southern California. I worked for a chain called the Red Onion and this big club called Cowboy and Crescendo Disco. And, our teen disco nights, we would have people like Prince and stuff like that come in. So it was a fun time entertainment wise.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, it started going down quick.
Mm-hmm.
I got intervened on. And when I went into treatment, and we'll just get going, it's like, when I went into treatment, like I said, I had no idea what people did in AA, and I really thank God for that. I think if I would have known, I wouldn't have gone.
Mm-hmm.
So I get the resistance, and alcohol and drugs for me really, up until that point, as bad as it got, I never thought I had a drinking and drugging problem. I just thought I liked to rock and roll a lot, and so I was always like, why are there so many cops on the street at 3 a.m? Why don't my boss understand you have to drink to do this job if you're a nightclub DJ? I mean, it was always, somebody else, which is kind of the point of the self-centered narcissism you find in addicts and alcoholics. But it was also, I just never really thought it was that bad, but everybody around me did. So what I was saying is alcohol and drugs weren't a problem. They were really my solution, so I drank when I was sad. I drank when I was happy. I drank if I was bored. I drank if I was fired up. So it was a pretty fast downward spiral. But when I got to AA, I'm definitely a different kind of story. I didn't really think I was at any kind of bottom. I thought they were going to teach me how to drink successfully. But my first few meetings I went to, I just remember the feeling of like, wow, this is kind of my tribe. It's like I've kind of found home. So, I always talk about surrender and the steps and something higher and service work because, those are the basics that the guys I got sober with really helped me. And, as somebody who's got some sober perspective now and done it a few days, I mean, if you're listening to this podcast and you're new or you're sober curious or you've tried AA and, it didn't work or you're just kind of trying to figure it out, I just always remind people that everybody had one day. Everybody that's sober now counted days at the beginning. But honestly, that's not really the point. You do have to put the plug in the jug or stop whatever your drug of, I don't call it drug of choice, because if you did it like me, it was no choice. So let's call it drug of preference. Okay.
Nice.
So you do have to abstain from your drug of preference, but that's not the point. The abstinence really isn't the point. So 12-step programs aren't a great achievement. It's not a meritocracy where the longer you stay sober, the more stuff you get, and AA is definitely not an abstinence accumulation club. Right. And so I like chips and birthdays and, like all the social media with people hanging their time out there. But honestly, time is an illusion. You can be really happy and pretty free very quickly through abstinence and the 12 steps of this program if you'll get busy working them. And you can be abstinent a really long time and be really, really miserable. In fact, I've watched many people with long-term sobriety blow their brains out sober or go back to drinking or drugging or, it's not a straight road journey. But I think sometimes this idea that time is somehow going to fix me, whether it's 90 days or 9 months or 9 years, like you kind of have to drop the expectations of time, because time's the illusion. So, AA is mostly like a gift and it's full of grace and mercy. Grace is getting things you don't deserve. And mercy is having things not happen to you that you do deserve, right? And miracles and love, but the weird part of AA, at least, is it all comes in the form of other sober alcoholics. So, it can be an interesting place to find those messages. So I tell, people I sponsor or talk to, if you want to count numbers, count what step you're on or count how many sober alcoholics you called today, or, count how many smiles you created, store clerk, right? Like, count something that matters in the day, because the secret of staying sober is, we're just doing Friday. It's like you only really ever have to do the day you're in, and I find most alcoholics in our heads, we want to live in the past or live in the future. We really don't want to get here, know? And so, getting here is really cool, so it's really, this is not a program of what it's what you do. Right. And the guys I sobered up with used to say, AA is not a program of knowledge and understanding. It's a program of faith and action. Yeah. So, it's like, I didn't have much faith when I got here. I really didn't like the God talk. I didn't relate to the big capital G. I had problems with pronouns way back before it was cool. I didn't like the hymns. I didn't like the hymns. I mean, it's like, because it just kind of made my skin crawl. And I didn't have a lot of religious hurt growing up. I grew up Congregationalist and Unitarian.
You don't like the church hymns? The church hymns are the best part. That was the shit I did like.
It's interesting because, like I said, I had friends that were raised Catholic or, Southern Baptist and, or Mormon, and they were around some pretty crazy behaviors. I really didn't experience that, but I just, the problem with God and all the God talk in AA when I got there was it just wasn't hip, slick, and cool. Yeah. And I was so much more concerned about being hip, slick, and cool and what you thought about me. And so, it took a while for it to sink in. But so here's the faith that I had early on. The faith I had early on was that the guys that were helping me, they believed in something. I wasn't sure if I did, but I believed that they believed. Right. And that was enough.
That's fair.
To kind of build a bridge, to kind of just finally give up to like radical acceptance and just like complete surrender. The guys I used to sober up with used to say, dude, if you're not done, there's really nothing here for you. The whole first step idea, and mine was kind of took, I'd say my first step, I was active in AA when I got out of rehab, was making meetings, had a sponsor, I worked the steps fast. But for at least the first couple of years, and I went right back to work in the nightclubs, by the way. I might not recommend that today, but I was back spinning records within 2 weeks, and, I look at it now and, for the first couple of years, I was kind of like, did I quit too soon? It's like, did I have a little wiggle room left, And the good news is
I know Carly
I was
feels
honest
that.
about it. I was honest with my sponsor about it, and he would say, that's just your alcoholism, right? And he said, if you'll just be honest about it and tell on yourself and keep doing the deal, that'll fade. And he was right. That's how, the guy that led the Saturday morning meeting used to say, it's cunning, baffling, powerful. And he would always add, he was always add, and patient and chicken shit. Right. And that's what this disease is. It's very powerful. And, a lot of times when we think we're thinking something, it's just your alcoholism, and that's why being, having sponsorship and having go-to guys or go-to girls that sober up around the time you did and people to contact, it's, we learn to like share, not just call our sponsors if we're buying a new car, but we kind of get to share our crazy ideas with other sober alcoholics and start feeling like, okay, I'm not the only one that thinks this stuff, So it's very interesting. So I've built some businesses sober. I was very lucky. I got to stay in my radio, television, film career. I've been in entertainment technology most of my career, which just means selling all the stuff that you see on rock shows, the moving lights and the video and the software that runs it. So, I've spent a career really doing stuff I love, and there's a lot of drugs and alcohol and rock and roll production and entertainment. but there's also a lot of sober people.
Mm-hmm.
So I've worked with big designers and big rock bands, and some of the most compelling artists are either really addicted or really sober.
Mm-hmm.
I got to raise 3 beautiful daughters. That's probably another podcast, but my daughters are Avalon, China, and Alexa.
My sister's name is
32,
Alexa.
Yeah, 32, 29, and 27 now, and they're all doing great. Had the first one with my wife at the time in the hospital, and the second 2 we did home birth. So I got to deliver number 2 and 3.
Nice.
And when you're holding your daughter freshly born, you don't really doubt much that there's a higher power. It's pretty easy to, just notice, how beautiful life is, and that, we're not in charge of much. So yeah.
David and Eric, do you hear that?
Yes,
They're
we hear
both
that.
about to be dads too.
That's awesome. Oh my gosh, that's so cool, guys. So when are your wives due?
Well, Eric's due first. So, what? June?
May 7th.
May. Oh my goodness.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Whoa,
Yeah,
bro.
my first daughter was born on May 2nd. So
Nice.
maybe you'll be a couple days early, and she'll have Avalon's birthday. So
Rad.
and
And yeah,
it's beautiful.
my wife is due November 5th.
My birthday's November 7th, guys. You're all over this.
We're killing
man.
You're all over this. You got
And
a Scorpio
No-
coming. It's a beautiful thing.
another true story. I was also a home birth, so that's pretty rad.
That is rad.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had this amazing nurse midwife that I met doing peer counseling, which was kind of hippie human growth stuff in Houston at the time.
Mhm.
And she was amazing. She had been a labor and delivery nurse for 14 years and was like super spiritual and cool. And wow, I mean, it's still, just thinking about it gives me goosebumps, man. So yeah, just this idea of surrender, this surrendering, and, I think Bill said it best in the big book. I mean, we don't always really get it, but, he says in there, we had to quit playing God, and so it's not just surrendering to the fact that I have a physical allergy and problem with alcohol, and that alcohol is certainly a higher power for me, but it's like surrendering to the idea that I'm going to control much of anything.
Mm-hmm.
The spiritual idea of getting in, everybody, it's like, do God's will. What does that mean? It just means going with the flow. It means life's happening. My job is trying to get with it. So, and if you look up surrender, there's an element of giving up, but it actually means to stop fighting,
Mm-hmm.
and the other, definition of surrender is to join the winning side. So it's like, when you can lay down your arms and, and like actually, let the flow of life and the river go with you, man, it's much easier to live sober. It's hard at first because we just love drugs and alcohol so much. I mean, I really had a grieving process that I had to go through because I love drugs and alcohol more than anything, because it gave me a sense of control.
Yeah.
That when I didn't like the way I felt, or I wanted to change the way I felt, I could, do that myself. But I didn't realize that it was kind of creating this spiritual laziness in me. And, a lot of the work getting sober is like, building a spiritual muscle, so the first spiritual muscle you build, if you go to an AA meeting a day, you pray at the beginning, usually serenity prayer, Lord's Prayer at the end. So, I was never praying twice a day before I got sober. And that was a small start, but it does start to change you. So, spiritual laziness, looks like sarcasm and cynicism and anger and hate and fear and resentment. And then you get into arrogance and victimhood and expectations and if only, and I didn't realize that all those attitudes and mental, places I went just meant I was being spiritually lazy, because if you read any spiritual literature, whether it's Western or Eastern, it basically says, the fruit of the Spirit is things like love and joy and peace and kindness and patience and faithfulness and gentleness. And that last one in the Bible is self-control. So, the fact that we're actually given this gift, this spiritual gift of, like, I don't know about you guys, but I was obsessed with getting loaded and drinking before I got to AA. And the obsession for me was lifted almost immediately. So I've chased a lot of spiritual things in my sobriety, but really AA meetings and helping guys and being just a drunk among drunks really is my sacred spiritual practice. And I've added a lot of stuff to it. Those are fun chats and chapters to think about, but never instead of. I had a very wise sponsor who was a country guy, down the middle AA guy, was not interested in, Scott Peck or, just anything, Wayne Dyer, Eckhart Tolle. He could give a crap about any of those guys. It's like he was just an AA guy. But he encouraged me. He said, Grif, if that stuff is interesting to you, going to Marianne Williamson weekends and sweat lodges and all the stuff I've done, he said, go for it. But don't ever forget it's in addition to, not instead of, your Alcoholics Anonymous program, that nothing will heal you like being around people that are broke like you. So a lot of times I've seen people go back to church and, do yoga or find something that is a spiritual practice. Yeah. It's like, oh, I'm good. I don't need AA anymore. And you know what? They're usually either drunk or back in the rooms if they're lucky in a few years. Because there is a specific, spiritual idea about, the fact that where we're broken is actually turns into our greatest gift that we can give somebody. And, it's like the quest to be normal, is like, it's in more about alcoholism. Yeah. So it's the idea that somehow, someday he will control and enjoy his drinking. It's the great obsession of every alcoholic. Many pursue it into the gates of insanity or death. And if you'll notice, it doesn't say that goes away when you get sober. And it doesn't go away at 10 years. And it doesn't go away when you get the right sponsor and go to enough meetings. That's the great obsession. So, if I'm thinking I'd like to control and enjoy my drinking, it just makes me a garden variety alcoholic. It doesn't mean anything's wrong or I'm doing the program wrong. It just means, that's going to be your great obsession. It's like, you're going to be able to, be normal someday. So, a lot of going to meetings, is you see what happens to people that don't go to meetings. And it's a really powerful way to keep you, keep me green. My program needs to stay green. And, the other idea that I'll share is just this sobriety wheel. That was something else my sponsor really told me early on. And I didn't realize how crucial it was going to be because of the ups and downs I've experienced in sober life. But, the sober wheel, if you draw a wheel, so start up at 12 o'clock and we're going to go around the clock. Okay. So we're going to go to 12, 3, 6, 9, and then back to 12. So at the top is pain, growth, serenity, complacency, followed by pain, growth, serenity, complacency, right? And so that's a wheel you go through in sobriety, right? And what he told me, he said, Grif, it's totally normal. If you stay sober a long time, you're going to experience pain, then you're going to grow, then you're going to do the work and get serene, then it's going to feel good and you'll get lazy and get complacent. And pretty soon the pain will be back. And again, he said, if you're in AA and doing, sponsoring people and doing service work and having a spiritual practice and really giving it away, then you can shorten the pain and complacency slices of that pie but that's just the process that you go through here. You know, and again, it's not a straight line up, right? It's like every time you hit something challenging or do something really stupid. I mean, I'm 66 now, so I've done a lot more stupid shit sober than I ever thought about doing drunk, right? And that's the gift of long-term sobriety. Is you get other things you get to work on as you kind of head through this thing. So it's really a fascinating experience.
All right. Awesome story, man. Well, we definitely have some questions for you. Who would like to go first? Anybody?
David, we don't need to go through this every time.
God damn it. I don't like to always go first.
You know you're going first, so why do you ask?
Because it's the nice thing to do. Okay. All right. All right, I'm going to go with a group question first, so everybody's going to answer this one. So you talked about how like when you first like showed up, you really like found your tribe. And like what my question is to everybody is how long did it take you to feel like you belonged? And I'll answer first as well. Really, I felt like I belonged my first meeting, like that very first time I showed up at the Serenity Center, and Tyler and Brad and Dan and all those like young people just like me were on the road of recovery. I was like, yeah, I'm like, I'm about this. I don't remember anything that was said in the meeting because I was crying very hard. But no, I shut up. Yeah, I felt that feeling of belonging that very first night. So, what about you guys? Grif?
You know, my first AA meeting was in that hospital. So they actually had a meeting that they took us to at Herman Hospital that was outside people that came in and a lot of the patients. So some of them were doing the Thorazine shuffle. Yep. I don't really remember, too much about what was said, but I did make a connection with that group when I heard people share. And I started going to the Post Oak Club in Houston, which is in a different location now, but still there. And yeah, I remember I was 28, which was a young person in 83 in AA. It's not a young person anymore. So, there were some crusty old guys that didn't want you to talk about drugs and just wanted you to talk about alcohol and all that normal BS controlling stuff that people try to do. But generally, once I sat in meetings and listened to the shares, I connected. And honestly, it's probably one of the places my codependency worked, because this chameleonism. So put me in a room with AAs, and I'm going to want to be a good AA, right? I think it's Tony Robbins that says the only thing that will change you in the next 5 years is the books you read and the people you hang out with. So it's a very powerful thing, this tribe idea.
Yeah, love that. What about you, Carly? How long did it take you to feel like you belonged?
I would have to say probably the second meeting that I went to, which was our old home group, David, and like Erica, I guess your old home group too.
Briefly,
but walking into there and like feeling like the atmosphere that I was in, I felt like I belonged, but then it still took me some time to like still like open up and be comfortable with myself.
Yeah.
And I mean, not even like today even, like there's still times where I feel like I don't belong, but that's my own shit and me comparing out. So it can go day by day, but I feel like that's completely normal. And if I stop fighting it and I surrender, then that belongingness is always there and it's constant.
Nice. Love that. Last but not least,
4 months.
4 months. Wow, that was
4 months.
That was such a
You kept coming back for 4 months.
Yeah.
So what was it that like in that fourth month? What did it?
I got a job at the home group and I got a sponsor.
All right.
Service work.
Very, very. Oh, Eric was Mr. Service for a while.
Yeah, but it's interesting. There was a woman in our meeting today, and she's young and she's newly sober, and she appears to be kind of socially distant, but she shares because we do round robin at that meeting, which means that everybody always gets a chance to share.
Mm-hmm.
And she actually said to the group today, I have social anxiety, so I know I don't always look at you, but I really am connecting with you as best I can. And then she went on to have this amazing share.
Mm.
And it's like you said, Robin, it's kind of like you start telling on yourself and things start changing. It's really the power of the love in the group, right? I mean, that's the mystery of going to meetings. That's so interesting to me.
Yeah. All right, Carly, what do you got for a question?
So what step has been the most important in your recovery?
Oh,
God, what a great question.
He's thinking.
I'll be a good old timer and say all of them first.
No, you got to pick one. Nope.
I'm going to pick. But, I mean, I'm just saying you do have to go through the process. So
Absolutely.
I'll say two things and then tell you the answer. So the most important thing about the steps when you get here is, one, get busy and do them fast. Actually, speed and completion is more important than thoroughness. So the early AAs used to have people through the 12 steps in a month or two at the most, right? A lot of meetings you had to do step 1, 2, and 3 before they would let you into the meeting. Okay.
What?
So we've kind of turned this into kind of a crazy psychotherapy thing. Mm-hmm. Even inventory, it says write an inventory of the business, not a freaking history of the business. So, I'm not saying, I'm for being thorough. And the other thing of the steps is the steps aren't homework. They're not something you ever complete. They're another circular wheel kind of designed for living that, as you go through them a couple times, you start incorporating them into your life.
Yeah.
So for me, in this last 10 years, part of my story is I went through a heinous, life-shattering divorce about 17 years ago from after 20 years of marriage to the mother of my daughters. And so step 11 really has been my biggest connection point.
Nice.
I did not meditate much before then. I was a pretty good prayer, but I like to talk, as you guys have figured out tonight. So I wasn't that great at listening. And so this idea that you can be in AA a long time and even do the steps and still think that the monkey chatter that's going on in your head is actually you. The prayer and meditation and conscious contact actually means quieting and learning to quiet your mind long enough where you start to separate from the monkey chatter, is what they call it in the East. Mm-hmm. And, meditation, I have a serious meditation practice now, and most of it's not cross-legged. A lot of it's guided in the evenings and the mornings. A lot of it's a walking meditation I do down by the beach. But, this idea that if we're going to pray and try to go with the flow and align with God's will, then we have to be quiet enough to actually let some of those intuitive thoughts and that new guidance actually come in. Mm-hmm. And, people will say, well, I can't meditate because I can't quiet my mind. And the job of meditation is not to quiet your mind. The job of meditation is to sit and observe your thoughts, which when you first start is like a freaking, Donkey Kong and pinball machine going together at the same time, right? It's like your thoughts but what happens if you start watching and observing your thoughts in meditation, like the clouds going by, they start slowing down. Mm-hmm. And so it's, and I'm still a guided meditator mostly because I just like where it takes my headspace. Yeah. I think a lot of us still wake up in dark dread in the morning. And if I pray and meditate, that magically gets turned towards something higher.
Love that. Great answer. All right, Eric, what you got?
So you mentioned a little bit about how you weren't a huge fan of the hymn and the God and the spirituality when you got in.
Can I interject real quick, Eric?
Yes.
So wait, when you were talking about hymns,
That
was
just-
it
it was
HIM
it's
or
fine.
HYMN?
To expect you to understand the situation at hand right now, David, is a lot to ask, right?
Wow, you're a dick. You're throwing a lot of shade tonight, Eric. I was thinking HYMN.
I know what you were
the
thinking.
actual
That's
songs.
why
I was
I
like,
didn't-
that's the best part.
And the beauty was I rolled with it, didn't I? Or
Yeah.
didn't I
You
roll
did
with it?
roll with it.
Well, now I feel like an idiot.
It's okay.
I went with the flow, man.
No, you were perfect. Go ahead.
How has your spirituality evolved since those first few meetings to where you are today?
I think the biggest change for me, and, I started out, like I said, I was very resistant to the God idea, but I knew there was something. Honestly, when I got sober, my most spiritual experience I had till I was 28 was doing mushrooms on Mount Bunnell in Austin, Texas, and laying out there with friends and looking at the stars and knowing there was something higher. And I'm not kidding. I mean, that really... and I always hunted and fished as a kid, so the woods were kind of my sacred getaway place. In adult life, it's been the beach. But so I started out at this big pyramid, the Unity Church in Houston. Then I got really Bible curious, and I don't mean just about Christianity, but I actually got curious about the Bible as a metaphysical guide, not the social religio thing it was of dressing up on Sunday, but it's like, what's really in there? So I went to the Second Baptist Church just because this guy was an amazing Bible teacher. And, then it was on to Course in Miracles. Like I said, after my divorce, I've been studying Buddhism for the last 17 years, which, Buddhism's not a religion, but it's a practice. And so, the thing I find, across the Bible and Hindu culture and Buddhism and AA, is this idea, I was looking for something external when I first got here, like what church will fix me or what belief will fix me or what weekend, ceremony will fix me. It's like, I was like, I'm just an answer guy. So I want answers. And the more searching and, actually painful surrender because of that divorce and being alienated from my 3 daughters and, ups and downs in business and life, it's more this idea. I mean, you find it in all 3 religions. I think Luke in Christianity, Jesus says, neither shall they say here or there, for behold, the kingdom of God is within you. Right. And then you go to Buddhism that says everything is impermanent and changing. Impermanence leads to suffering, making life imperfect. But the self or the inner existence is not personal and it's unchanging. Right. So again, this idea of something within. And then you read Bill, and Bill says we found the great reality deep down within us. In the last analysis, it is only there that he may be found, and I just replace he and him with love. So you can say it is only there that love may be found. It was so with us. With this attitude, you cannot fail. The consciousness of your belief is sure to come to you. So this idea that we have everything we need inside us when we arrive, it's already there. So it's really clear, the sunlight of the spirit idea is more like, I thought you guys needed to clean my windshield, and get the mud off the front. But the longer I'm sober, it's like, oh my gosh, I got to clean the windshield from the inside. That's where all the dirt is. The sun's already shining out there. I've already got everything inside of me that's divine, and part of the Buddhists have this idea, of this guy looking for his ox. Right. And he's going all over town asking people in the dark, where is it? And he's riding an ox. Right. Or the Buddhist idea of the finger that wants to grasp the hand. Right.
Yep.
And the finger can't the finger can't grasp the hand because it's part of the hand.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like you're looking for this idea, and it's like, dude, you're already part of the bigger thing.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to get quiet enough and notice the connection.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's back to step 11, to go full circle back to her question about the most important step, and the big emphasis, if you read Language of the Heart and As Bill Sees It and Bill's later writings, he pretty much warns you over and over and over again, without the growth and enlargement of your spiritual life, you're screwed. And that's not a quote, but that's my version, right? It's like, you have to keep growing spiritually, or, you're basically a dry drunk, which I don't know about, I've watched guys blow their brains out 20 years sober because they just refuse to, find something higher, and, cars and poker and sugar and, all the non-alcohol and drug things you can try to stuff in that God-shaped hole. They don't fit in that God-shaped hole. You have to discover your own conception of something higher to really access the power that's kind of always been there, right?
Yeah. Love that. All right. What am I going to go with? I have a whole list of questions, but I'm going to limit it to one. So how has recovery evolved over the 35 plus years of your recovery? And where would, like, what still needs to be done on, like, to evolve the path of recovery in the future?
So now, do you mean my program, the AA program, recovery in general? Where do you want me to hit that one from, perspective wise?
I would say kind of like recovery in general and AA. Like, have you seen them evolve at all?
Yeah, very little, and I think it's good. So, I'm definitely a crusty old timer at this point with great flexibility and love for young people in AA and what's going on. But, so the old timers when I got here, didn't want you to talk about drugs and alcohol. And I did anyway. We laughed at them and said, dude, it took you 45 years to get here. I got here in 5, so I never took any of that crap seriously because my perspective always was, you have no idea what I need to share in an AA meeting to stay sober. So, group conscious can clamp down on some of that. But generally, dude, the chapter used to be called Dr. Addict Alcoholic. That made me mad when they changed that title, right? Like, there's mention of pills and hoppers and stuff all through the big book and the stories. So a lot of those guys were poly addicted, and I don't know where this, I get the singleness of purpose idea. So I'm very grateful for the many, many other 12-step programs that have popped up to help people be in a tribe of their brokenness, to find this power that's already inside them to get help. So I think AA has grown a lot. I think it's because of the traditions and pretty good management and this crazy idea that nobody really runs it. It actually is still working pretty well. So, and I, as somebody asked me this question, at a speaker meeting when we did Q&A, and it's like, guys, AA is the same because it's about each one teach one, right? It's about individual sponsorship and doing the 12 steps and love. And so as long as the love stays in the room, the format of it isn't that important. So, I've kind of adjusted because I'm in digital marketing in the recovery world now. And it's like, the social media stuff of posting your time, that was pretty abhorrent to me when it first started because I believe in anonymity. And it's not, part of it's because, it's not that it's not a beautiful thing that you're sober a certain amount of time. But it's like, I don't know that, but then I look at the power of social media to maybe make somebody say, hey, I could get sober. So there's good in it. Right. Same thing with the move to change the big book, and it's like, I just don't. I mean, the big book, as even the problems I had with it, were part of my growing to hear the real message in it. And in case people don't know, the big book's been rewritten already 20 or 30 times. There's a bunch of people that just said, I don't like this language, so I'm going to rewrite it in my language. And there's a bunch of good versions out there. There's a Buddhist version and a Christian version and I mean, it's like, so I like that. And I like studying. I'm reading this book that looks like a Gutenberg Bible right now called The Writing or The Creation of AA, The Writing of the Big Book. And it's amazing. Oh my gosh. It's like, there's so much great history to feel like, wow, we're part of this, and, the miracle that these guys figured out what they did when there were only 2 of them or 100 of them. And now there's millions of us. I guess as I get older, I look for the essence of things, not so much, I don't look for reasons to be offended anymore. I look for the similarities, not the differences.
All right. Love that. Carly, what'd you got?
Me?
Yes. You're
Oh, right. Sorry. It is hard to hear you a little bit today.
I know. You got Garrett making a whole bunch of noise in the background, so he's not helping.
I moved. It was too much.
Nice.
So let's see. What does recovery mean to you, and has that meaning changed over time from being in recovery years ago to now?
Nice.
Recovery is life. And I think the greatest change, from either early on or just the evolution, you see a lot, and I mean, one of my favorite recovery books is Spirituality of Imperfection. So, I keep reaching because I think it's good to reach and keep growing. But when you really realize your complete human fallibility and imperfections, there was a quote by William James in one of the devotionals today that talked about how beautiful it was to confess and do 4 steps and, get rid of your rottenness, and it's like, once you make your rottenness public, at least you don't have to smear it around like you're really virtuous. It's like, so I just like that I can be sober and not reaching any kind of perfection. I've done a lot of Al-Anon. We didn't talk much about Al-Anon, but I've been in Al-Anon for, since that divorce. And it's like, just lightening up, and realizing it's like, man, recovery's not like it's not a sentence, and this idea of, happy, joyous, and free. And those ideas are in there for a reason. That's the product. That's kind of like that fruit of the spirit I talked about. So if you're not happy, joyous, and free, you might have some work to do. Right?
Yeah. Love that. All right, Eric. Last but not least.
Yeah. So you mentioned Al-Anon, and I was actually going to ask a question about, your role as a sponsor to other people, but I guess I'll go beyond that and talk, and ask about how where do you feel like you do your most service? And this doesn't have to, relate to just AA. But where do you feel like you give back the most, and where do you find the most enjoyment in giving back?
Well, that's fascinating. What a good question. So with COVID, the entertainment and my technology job came to a screeching halt, right? All revenue generated in any kind of entertainment, sports, or rock and roll stopped. So I've been thinking about working in recovery for 10 or 15 years. I've gone back to school and done some addiction studies. And, it's kind of at my age, I'm kind of like, can I go from success to significance and give back a little of what I've been given so freely? So it's been interesting working in the recovery business the last year. That's been a place, I think personally, I've always gone to a lot of meetings. I helped co-create a men's retreat that's still going on in Southern California on the West Side men's group. I love sponsoring guys. I've got a handful of guys, some of them still in LA and some here in Florida, and guys that I've sponsored in the past that are, still dear friends and part of my sober go-to guy group. I just feel like, being a guide for people who want it. And I think the biggest change, I don't think I was ever quite the Nazi sponsor because I'm too much of a people pleaser and want you to like me. So I wasn't ever too much of a jerky sponsor. But, the addition of Al-Anon and Time, and my first sponsors were great. I've always had fabulous sponsorship in this program. But, they really gave me this image of, the new guy's driving the car because it's his program. And I can't drive his program. So if I'm a sponsor, I'm standing outside the driver's side window, and I can run alongside the car as fast as he wants to drive, right? But if I start trying to make him do stuff, and that those guys would always say, don't tell him what to do, tell him what you did, right? And again, they would say stuff like, Grif, you can't steer a parked car, right? And so if people pause in the program, there's nothing much you can do until they're ready to go again, right? Because the desire and ability to work the program. Now, if a guy needs guidance or doesn't know what to do, I'm glad to tell him what I did and kind of give him a framework. But I think the nicest compliment I ever got was from a buddy named Shane in West LA that I sponsored, and he's a beautiful guy now. His life's completely bloomed. And he gave me the nicest compliment. He said, Grif is the Phil Jackson of AA sponsors. When I get into stuff, He just wants me to play. He wants me to play through it, right? And so, yeah, it's like I got out. I can't fix anybody. And those same early AA sponsors used to, the most freeing thing that was ever said to me, and this was after my first couple of guys I sponsored. One got a DUI and was drunk and in jail within a month. Another guy got drunk and killed somebody in a car accident, right? I mean, it wasn't going well, right? I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not doing it right. And my sponsor just looked at me and he said, Grif, there's nothing you can say to get somebody drunk. And on the corollary flip side of the coin, there's absolutely nothing you can say to somebody to keep them sober, right? All you can do is just offer what was given to you, and it's going to be what's going to be, right? And it was just it's like if you see yourself more as a channel for something higher, which is just, I did these crazy steps and I don't really understand how, but they somehow relieved me of this bondage of self and wanting to drink and drug all the time. And you can just share that with people, then that has to be enough. Whatever they do with it really is none of your business, But I mean, there's nothing more heartbreaking than watching somebody go back, and there's nothing more beautiful than watching the light come on with somebody you sponsor. I mean, wouldn't we all rather have guys that show up ready to, with a big book and a pen and a yellow pad and they're ready to go? I mean, but not everybody's like that. And I think you have to trust that you're just Johnny Appleseed. Just plant the seeds, and it's between them and their higher power. It's really not your business.
Perfect. All right. Well, I think we are about out of questions, so we would like to thank our guest Grif for joining us this evening.
What a pleasure to join you guys, man. What a cool experience. Thank you so much. Super grateful for you. Super grateful for all the work you do in social media and putting the podcast out, and just grateful to participate in my own recovery, man. Thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. And we'd like to Let me try that again. We'd like to get our listeners over to you as well. So will you give yourself a plug real quick? Let our listeners know how to find you.
Sure. Let's see. Instagram is @Grif Palmer, or you can find me Grif Palmer on Facebook. It's GrifPalmer. So I'm out there. Shoot me a note. Put a post up. If you're in South Florida, let's make a meeting together. And any way I can be of service, I'm always open for that. So thanks for the opportunity.
All right. Well, Eric, would you like to let our listeners know how they can become part of the podcast recovery family?
We came up with a good way to do this last week, and I can't remember it.
I don't know.
But
that was better than the media statement.
It was better than the media statement.
We're workshopping it.
Wait! Listen to last week's podcast and get the way to do it.
Okay. I'll do that, Eric won't.
But here at Podcast Recovery, we need your support to help keep the mics on. So you can join our home group through our Patreon page, or you can support us by liking, commenting, subscribing, reviewing, and doing all the things you can do on our many social media channels on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, etc. David?
All right. Here at Podcast Recovery, we are aiming to expand the scope of support for recovering addicts. Accessibility and convenience of helpful services is paramount to combating addiction. We work to bring the message of recovery to every addict, wherever and whenever it is needed. We believe that a powerful voice of recovery should be obtainable, practical, and at the touch of a button. Every addict deserves to hear a message of hope, and Podcast Recovery is here to provide it. All right, everybody, thanks for joining us. Thanks, Grif. Thank you, Eric and Carly, for your time as well. But most importantly, everybody
Thank you, David.
Oh, thank you. Most importantly, everybody out there, Carly, if you'd let them know.
Stay safe and stay clean.